Welcome back to Atlassian Team 26. We are streaming live here in Anaheim. I'm Alison, Kosik alongside Christophe, Bertrand, and we're about to talk about startups. Startups, they move fast and they wear lots of hats.
And it's never too early to start with Atlassian.
Oh, that's a good one.
I like that.
Let's get right to our guest who is with Atlassian, obviously. Philip Braddock, he's the head of Atlassian for Startups. Welcome to theCUBE.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So talk me through your role at Atlassian.
Sure. So as you said, my title is Head of Atlassian for Startups. And what that really means in practical terms is we have a go-to-market motion called Atlassian for Startups. And it is let's call it a package or an offer that is specifically designed for small early stage teams. So what we do with this offer is there are 6 different Atlassian apps. We have Jira, Confluence, and Loom, Jira Product Discovery, Service Collection, and/or Bitbucket. And the and/or is very important because when you apply to Atlassian for Startups, you get to pick which of those 6 apps you want. Certainly, I'd love you to pick all 6, but if you only pick one, we'll still be friends. But what we are doing with this offer is there's a very lightweight set of eligibility criteria. And if you meet the criteria, we enable up to 50 seats for free on the premium edition of any or all of those apps that I mentioned for 1 year for up to 50 of your teammates. And the one thing that's really nice about it is it's not just the free tooling, which gives startups a little bit of that economic tailwind that they so desperately need often. We have dedicated customer success managers who work exclusively and only with customers in the Atlassian for Startups program. So if you want to get on Atlassian because this is financially interesting, or the lack of money is the financially interesting part, but you've never created a Jira ticket, for example, our CSMs will literally run a session for your team called Creating Your First Jira Ticket. On the other end of the experience curve, if you're an early stage company and you know a lot about Atlassian, well, maybe they'll help you evaluate MCP server integrations, for example.
Right.
And so basically, we've designed an entire 1-year journey specific for early stage teams where we are there to provide as much high touch support at scale as we can possibly do to make sure that you find as much value out of Atlassian in that 1 year. And then obviously our hope is that there's mutual benefit and that these customers continue to grow with us and we grow with them as partners.
What about startups who just don't know what they don't know about what they need?
Yeah, it's a great question. In that capacity, I'll be honest, like at the pre-eval stage, I suppose, it is a little bit self-service, but once you are in the program, our CSMs will help you understand the pros and cons of different tools for your use cases. And and I appreciate the question, part of why I mentioned that and/or at the beginning when I was listing the apps is because we are not here to force our tool set upon anyone. We want you to pick the Atlassian apps that solve the most acute problems you have. If that means all 6 apps solve problems for you, fantastic. And if you're not yet ready for a tool like Jira Product Discovery, for example, because maybe it's just you and one other co-founder, we'll get your workflows going on Jira, get your documentation and knowledge base in Confluence, and maybe leverage Loom to create videos for your customers, for example. If you decide you want more tools down the road, we can absolutely do that during the free period of that 1 year. But overall, we really do take a customer support mindset, or a customer service mindset is maybe a more appropriate way to say it, where the customer are the startups themselves.
Yep.
Tell us about your background with Atlassian and what you did with Atlassian Ventures, which obviously may have something to do with investment.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, so I've had a very fortunate career here at Atlassian. I've been here 11 years. I actually started here when I was an intern in graduate school, and I have had the good fortune to really grow professionally and personally, but professionally as Atlassian has grown as a company and as a business. When I started here, as I mentioned, I was a project manager intern. I won't walk you through every step of the way, but I've worked in 5 departments and finance twice. So in some strange way, I have organically created what I like to call like my own little rotation program at Atlassian. So as you mentioned, immediately prior to running Atlassian for Startups, which I came over to do roughly 2 years ago, I was helping to run Atlassian Ventures, which is our corporate venture fund. So for those who don't know, Atlassian does have a corporate venture fund called Atlassian Ventures, where we are doing exactly what it sounds like. We are investing balance sheet capital into third-party startups. Prior to that, I was chief of staff to our CFO, but I guess now it's 2 former CFOs ago, with James now firmly in his seat as our current CFO. And prior to that, as I mentioned, a variety of different things as well throughout my time at Atlassian. And one thing I've always made a very concerted effort to do is be pretty darn deeply involved with Atlassian's culture and value programs. It's one of the things that really keeps me here at Atlassian, not to mention the new and interesting opportunities I've gotten.
Right, let's talk about the market a little bit. Sure. Startups, obviously, we were talking earlier, you're based in San Francisco. What could be happening now with startups in San Francisco?
Everything.
That's AI, right?
Yes. Well,
so let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's tons of AI. And one thing that's interesting, you mentioned San Francisco, and that is coincidentally where I'm based. But we run a global program. Atlassian is a global company, and we support startups all over the world. I actually do get questions sometimes, is this only for, Bay Area-based companies or Silicon Valley companies? And I say, why would I run a program? Why would I limit myself in that capacity? We want to serve as many startups as possible. And while a lot of them are now, AI dominant or AI forward companies, we have some great examples of more traditional businesses that are using Atlassian's tools. We have a coffee company in Dublin, Ireland, who uses Jira to map their physical supply chain. There is a sustainable clothing company in India who took advantage of the Atlassian for Startups offer, for example. So while a bunch of what we see is AI, I think that's less a reflection of Atlassian and just more the market at large. And I actually think we're fairly close to an inflection point whereby if you can put yourself back maybe 15 or 20 years where everyone was like, I have a mobile app, and then it all became sudden like, well, of course you have a mobile app. I feel as though AI is becoming sort of the baseline now. And I frankly think that even a company who's not building a traditional tech company is probably leveraging AI in some capacity in their workflow, even if it's just to try out like marketing signage or something like that, for example. So we deeply believe in embedding Atlassian's AI capabilities into the startups in the program, which is part of why, and I didn't mention this earlier, it's part of why Rovo comes with every single instance of Atlassian for Startups. So even if you only pick one of those 6 apps I mentioned, every single Atlassian for Startups customers gets Rovo for the entire time they're in the program to ensure that they can take the most advantage of the best and baddest capabilities Atlassian has.
Let's talk about startup realities.
Sure.
Where do early stage teams struggle the most? Communications, prioritization, execution? Biggest struggles? Where are the biggest challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the thing you didn't mention is funding, right? Like if you run out of runway, you have no company.
Right.
It's very, very simple. It's complicated, but it's very simple at the same time. I have seen in my experience, and let's say it's about 5 total years now, including the time with ventures, I think it's the prioritization piece. And I think that when you are a real builder as a founder, the hardest thing to do is constrain yourself. You just keep thinking about, well, I can add this on and we could go over here and we can go over there. And usually that is true. Usually even the thread is logical. It makes sense. It might even make business sense. But I actually challenge founders to sort of ask themselves a question of, do you have a prioritization or a deprioritization problem? And I appreciate that that's semantics, but I think it is incredibly important to try to focus on getting a few things or even one thing really, really right at the beginning, nailing that use case, really surprise and delight and serve your customer need and expand out from there. I think when you consider, well, hey, let's add this on and that on, like you can, but does it make sense to do it? And more to the point where I think some founders struggle, and this is a particular type of founder, is they're very interested in building the product. They intuitively understand someone has to sell the product. So they're not as interested in that second part. And the third part that I've come to identify in my time is like where they know it's important, but they struggle to put time in is building the company, the culture, the values, the mission statement. Do you want to have a separate foundation? Where do you want your office footprints to be? Some of this stuff does happen fast, and it happens a little bit sort of by happy accident. You make an acquisition, you have a new office, things like that. But if you if you believe in these 3 pillars, let's call it, the product, the commercialization, and then the company itself, I have often found that those 2 other elements, sometimes they're not afterthoughts, but it's the kind of thing that founder, if they're not comfortable doing it, let's say they're more technically oriented, for example, and they want to build products, well, then you better have a great co-founder who is comfortable on the other side of that coin, or go hire some really great people. Because if you think that you're going to just build a product and it's going to sell itself, I mean, product-led growth here at Atlassian, it is a strategy, but it's a strategy. That's not an accident. It doesn't just happen. And so I think it's really important to be very intentional about all 3 of these dimensions. And that's not to say that, the second and third have to come as quickly as the first. You've got to have a great product or service before you can do anything else. But I think those other pieces are critical to focus on as well.
So let's double click on that, because it sounds to me very obviously you're doing so much more than just providing free tools. Obviously, there's a whole ecosystem of support. I imagine other startups, partners, access to founders, access to experienced entrepreneurs as part of the mix. It feels to me like you've built a very unique set of or community of not only startups but also people. And the tool set, of course, shines in the process. But I really like where you are going with the conversation on being just much more than a product and technology. So let's talk about that. give me a couple of examples of startups you've worked with recently that have sort of evolved from, hey, we're just getting started, we have an idea, we think it's going to work, we're going to use your tools, and they grow and it becomes a big success.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I name examples, and I'm happy to, the one thing I also want to call out is it's not just Atlassian for startups, where I think Atlassian as a business is supporting startups. You did mention Atlassian Ventures, and that's what I call sort of the second leg of a three-legged stool. And the third-legged stool would actually be the Atlassian Marketplace and the Forge app development platform. And so if you think about what each of these things do, Atlassian for startups, free tooling, support with that tooling. Atlassian Ventures, actual capital to go grow your business. And the marketplace effectively becomes a point to build apps on top of Atlassian's core apps and distribute those apps to 300,000 plus Atlassian global customers around the world. So we try to work as harmoniously as we can amongst the three different groups. We have these nice internal handshakes. We often try to support each other because, to your point, it's not just about the tooling. At some point, the tooling is great, but you've got to also, it's a means to an end. Atlassian's mission, of course, is to unleash the potential of every team, and that is what we want to do with our products. We want to help you deliver value to your end customers. And so in that regard, we have seen some startups come in, let's say they were at sort of a seed stage, for example, and very quickly they're in the Atlassian for Startups program. 90 days later, they land a Series A, and then they've just shot up. It's not, some of it is product market fit, some of it is the capital to then hire, but those are the most fun stories we have, where we see someone come in who is squarely within, our ICP, our ideal customer persona, sub 50 seats. And again, not to say that's Atlassian's definition of a startup, that's just how we've designed this package. And then for all intents and purposes, overnight, you just see the seat count going up. And it is admittedly correlation, not causation for success. But presumably, especially for a startup, there are really only two ways that you're going to grow. One is you start bringing in significant revenue or you raise capital. And either of those are not necessarily deterministic signs that you're going to build a durable business, but they're very positive signals. And so when we see that, we do go out of our way to try to share that information with relevant teams at Atlassian so that these high growth customers, then maybe they get handed off to a different team, or we figure out ways to support them given how fast they might be accelerating.
If you can give one founder one piece of advice early on, what should they do? What would be that piece of advice that you would give a founder?
Dive in, head first. Whether you're...
What about this? So then there's the pressure of speed versus, obviously funding and all, but there's all of that to consider as well. So before you say, do you really mean dive in?
Oh, no, I mean it. And what I mean by that is fully commit to being a founder. And that doesn't mean be rude. It doesn't mean just, assume this sort of archetype of a founder. What I mean by that is nobody is going to care about your business more than you and your potential co-founder or co-founders. And so when I say dive in, it's not to suggest that you need to, never sleep. It's nothing like that. It's an emotional commitment, because if you're not going to be into it, you're never going to be able to attract people to come work with you. And then to the question you asked earlier, you go try to pitch your business in a half-hearted way to an investor. They're going to say, well, this is a cool idea, but the person behind you is really committed. So I'm going to write them a check. So I would say, if it's one piece of advice, it's that. And if you want to have the whole pros and cons of raising capital, you have me back for a different session and we'll do that whole thing.
Yeah, that could be a whole conversation. Well, what it sounds to me is like you're offering a very interesting mix of opportunities here. I think there's definitely the team, the community, the funding is important, the tool set, the marketplace. We're talking, Atlassian being present in 80% of the global companies out there.
Something like that, yeah.
So quite a big market, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned some companies going from seed to round A in 90 days, which is very, very fast. And I'm sure there are other stories. Is beyond the advice of diving in, what would you say would be a good differentiator for an entrepreneur being successful in your program? Of course, they want to dive in, we get that. Question. But what is a differentiator? What makes me more successful potentially as an entrepreneur having a chat with you about your program?
That's a great question. Strangely enough, my answer might be counterintuitive, but I actually think that if you're an entrepreneur interested in Atlassian for startups, don't feel like you have to justify what you're working on. We are not here to pass judgment on your customer growth, your revenue. If you have revenue, I'm not even here to necessarily make a determination on what stage you're at, from ideation all the way to product market fit. What I want to do is I want to provide you the tool so you can go do what you have chosen to go do. And the other thing is, most startups go through pretty significant pivots. And we're not necessarily here to make a judgment call one way or the other on that. We trust you to run your business. We want you to trust us to provide you the best-in-class tooling to help you run your business.
What excites you most right now about the startup ecosystem?
Oh, it is so vibrant. Like, I have, for better or worse, traveled all over the world over the past 2 years. Better for work, maybe not as great for my partner at home sometimes. But it's booming, the startup ecosystem. There is capital being deployed all over the world. And I think what's really, really exciting, and this goes back a little bit to the Bay Area question, there are incredibly talented and passionate founders all over the world. Startups, maybe the Silicon Valley is still sort of the heart of the sort of machinery of it all, but it's everywhere. It's in Sydney, it's in Bangalore, it's in London, it's in Paris, it's in Singapore, it is down in Argentina. I mean, there are really, really talented founders everywhere, and knowing that, just sort of the size of that opportunity gets me very, very excited.
That's wonderful. Great conversation. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you guys. It was great.
And you've been watching theCUBE, the leader in live technology coverage and enterprise tech analysis. We'll be right back.